The ration Chit appeared on Veth Saron's intake desk before Dina Calloway had even finished sitting down. Not placed deliberately, it simply fell out of the woman's left boot when she crossed her ankle over her knee, and she caught it without looking, the way a person catches something they have caught 1,000 times. She tucked it into her palm, glanced at Veth's expression, and shrugged. Sorry habit. Veth recorded the moment anyway. It was her function aboard the survey vessel Ethon Constancy to record things, specifically anomalous human behaviors logged during mandatory post-salvage debriefs. She had conducted 41 such debriefs in the past 2 station years. None of the previous 41 humans had been carrying anything in their boot. None of them had caught a falling object with that particular quality of reflexive calm. Either the calm of someone who expected the world to throw small things at them at irregular intervals, and had simply elected not to be surprised. Calloway Dina, Veth said, pulling up the intake form. Salvage pilot, independent contractor, vessel registry Harthwick Sable, correct. That's me. Your salvage claim from the Dural Shoals is pending review. Before the tribunal processes it, I need a full account of the retrieval operation. Standard debrief, no adversarial intent. Veth paused. You may begin with your initial approach to the target. Dina Calloway was 29 years old by the human calendar, with the particular kind of face that had spent a significant portion of those years in low-grade ultraviolet, slightly weathered at the jaw and brow, clear-eyed, patient. She wore salvage gear with the practiced ease of someone who had forgotten it was there. The ration Chit was still in her hand. Initial approach, she said. Okay, but if I'm being thorough, and I'm guessing you want thorough, I should probably back up a little. The Dural Shoals job wasn't really a job by the time I got there. It was a consequence. Veth's stylus paused above the form. A consequence of a different job, which was itself a consequence of an earlier situation. The human smiled, not unkindly. I can give you just the Shoals piece if that's what you want, but the piece that answers all your questions about how I got there, how I navigated back, and why the claim form has that discrepancy in column 4, that piece makes no sense without the other 2. Veth set down the stylus. She had learned in 41 debriefs to set down the stylus at moments like this. Begin where you need to begin, she said. Dina Calloway began 6 months earlier, in the Vethani Drift. The Vethani Drift was a fuel depot cluster, 12 stations in loose formation around a cold brown dwarf, notable primarily for being the intersection of 3 supply routes and 1 ancient transit corridor that nobody used anymore. Dina had gone there to pick up a cargo manifest and a temporary berth assignment. What she had found instead was a Karath surveyor vessel with a failed attitude thruster, spinning slowly in the depot's outer margin, its crew of 9 broadcasting a distress call on a frequency nobody monitored. Nobody monitored it, she said, because the Karath used the old transit standard frequencies, and transit standard was decommissioned 11 years ago, and the depot administration had quietly stopped maintaining the receivers for it about 9 years ago without telling anyone. The Karath vessel, Veth said carefully, would have been the Soren Kell. Is that what it was? I didn't know the name at the time, I just saw the spin. The Soren Kell had been registered as missing. Veth had a record of it somewhere in the Ethon Constancy's archives. 11 crew, she thought, not 9. She said nothing. Dina had matched the spin and docked with the Soren Kell using a technique she described as patience and geometry. The crew had been aboard for 19 days with failing life support and had consumed every emergency ration to the last crumb. Dina had her own rations, a week's worth, nothing extraordinary, and she had distributed them, run 2 fuel cell recharges to stabilize their attitude control, and then towed the Soren Kell to the nearest functioning depot berth under a docking code she had technically not been authorized to use. The docking authority filed a complaint, she said. which is probably why the Kareth tribunal record has my vessel flagged, but their own crew confirmed my account. I have a signed statement from their engineer. Veth noted this. She would pull the Soren Kell records later. She had a feeling they would confirm Dina Calloway's version precisely. She was beginning to develop a sense for when that was going to be the case. And from the Vethani drift, she said, you proceeded to the Dural Shoals. Not directly. Dina looked at the chit in her hand for a moment, then set it on the edge of the desk, not carelessly, but with a particular deliberateness, like setting down a cup of something hot. There was the matter of the Quarev Station incident first. Veth picked up the stylus again. The Quarev Station incident had not been in any debrief file Veth had prepared. That was the first unusual thing. The second unusual thing was that Dina Calloway described it with the same even tone she had used for the Soren Kell rescue. The tone of someone recounting events that had been, at the time, merely a series of problems to be solved in sequence. Quarev Station was a hegemony waypoint on the edge of administered space, notable for being the last point of reliable communication before the dead zones began. Dina had stopped there to file her Soren Kell report and had arrived during what she described as a situation. The situation was that a hegemony inspection team had locked down the station over a tariff dispute, and the dispute had gotten complicated. And in the middle of getting complicated, someone had made an error with the station's atmospheric management system, and the secondary habitat ring was losing pressure at a rate that was going to become a problem in about 40 minutes. The hegemony inspection team, Veth said, had sealed all maintenance corridors. They had because of the tariff dispute. The maintenance corridors were sealed. The access panels to the atmospheric management conduits were not. Dina paused. They were on the outside of the station. On the hull, in a section that was technically still in vacuum. Veth stared at her. I had my suit, Dina said, with a slight lift of her shoulders that was almost an apology. It took about 22 minutes. The inspection team was still arguing over the tariff documentation when the pressure stabilized. Veth did not ask how a salvage pilot had known the layout of a hegemony waypoint station's external conduit system. She suspected the answer would be something like patience and geometry. She wrote down hull traverse, atmospheric restoration, unauthorized access panel, no casualties, and moved on. And then, she said, the Dural Shoals. The Dural Shoals were a debris field in the outer arc of the Marit system, the remains of 3 colliding ore carriers from a century-old transit accident, scattered across roughly 40 light seconds of empty space. The salvage value was well documented. The navigational hazard was also well documented. The field generated enough electromagnetic interference to render most instrument arrays unreliable at close range, and there were no beacons, no charts more recent than 60 years, and no other vessels operating in the area. Dina had gone in anyway. I had a partial chart, she said. 60 years old, but debris fields don't move much if nothing pushes them. The relative positions drift, but the clusters hold. I went in slowly, used visual reference, and found the secondary ore carrier's drive assembly intact. That's the thing I'm filing the claim on. You navigated 40 light seconds of interference-heavy debris using a 60-year-old chart and visual reference, Veth said. Mostly. There was a section in the middle where the chart was wrong. One of the clusters had shifted, and I lost instrument contact for about 6 hours. 6 hours. My navcomp was down. The interference takes it out past a certain density, so I navigated by the stars through the forward viewport. Dina picked up the ration chit from the edge of the desk. She turned it over in her fingers, and Veth saw, for the first time, what was on the back. Pencil marks, fine and precise, sketched directly onto the food packaging material. A loose grid. Points marked with tiny careful dots, connected by faint lines to form the shapes of navigational reference stars visible from the Merit system's outer arc. Veth's stylus stopped. "That is a ration, Chit," she said. "From the Soren Kell, actually. One of the Kareth crew gave it to me. They're rations, not mine. I'd already eaten mine. I drew the chart on the way back from the Vethani drift because I knew the Navcomp was going to have trouble in the shoals, and I wanted something I couldn't lose. Something that didn't need power." "You drew a navigational reference chart on the back of a food ration packet." "With a pencil." Dina held it up. The markings were small but exact. Veth could see the care in them, the way each point had been pressed into the thin material with controlled pressure, dark enough to read, light enough not to tear. "I matched the sketch to what I could see through the viewport. The interference doesn't affect light, just electronics. Stars are still stars." Veth looked at the Chit for a long time. She was a xenologist. Her training covered human physiological variances, human psychological profiles, human cultural practices across 47 documented regional groups. She had a category for improvised tools. She had a category for navigational creativity. She had a category for salvage pilots who operated in high-risk zones and built informal skills sets through years of accumulated necessity. She did not have a category for this. Not because it was impossible. It was not impossible. It was, in fact, a perfectly logical solution to the problem of navigating without instruments through a debris field that blocked electronics. The logic was entirely sound. The method was entirely viable. She did not have a category for it because it had simply never occurred to her that anyone would be calm enough, in 6 hours of instrument-dead silence, surrounded by debris moving at various vectors, to hold a scrap of paper up to a cracked forward viewport and steer by the correspondence between pencil marks and stars. "Did it work?" Veth said, and then caught herself because she already knew the answer. Dina Calloway was sitting in front of her, filing a salvage claim alive. "It worked," Dina said. Veth processed the claim over the following 2 days. She pulled the Soren Kell records, 11 crew, not 9. Dina had apparently not counted the 2 who were unconscious when she boarded. She pulled the Quarev Station incident report, which confirmed the atmospheric event and noted, with visible bureaucratic confusion, that the pressure had stabilized before any official response was mobilized. The cause had been listed as spontaneous system recovery, because the inspection team's sealed corridor logs showed no authorized personnel in the conduit access zones. She verified the navigational data from the Dural Shoals retrieval against the drive assembly's internal recorder, which had been logging position data passively throughout the operation. The recorder showed Dina's vessel moving through the interference zone in a series of careful arcs, each course correction small and deliberate, over the full 6-hour window of instrument failure. The arcs matched the starfield. Not approximately, precisely. Veth filed the claim approval and sat for a while at her intake desk in the survey vessel's debriefing bay, where the morning shift had left the overhead panels on the bright setting. The light that came down flat and clean, the kind that made everything visible and left nowhere for ambiguity to hide. She had the ration Chit in front of her. Dina Calloway had left it on the desk when she stood to go, said, "You can keep it if you want," and walked out. Veth had not said anything. She had simply watched the woman leave and then looked at the Chit, and then looked out the debriefing bay's small port window at the stars beyond. The Chit was roughly 4 centimeters by 6. The food packaging material was slightly waxy on the front, printed with the Kareth script for standard nutritional content, and on the back in careful pencil was a map. Not a complex map, not a map any instrument could have produced with its layered precision and data integration and error correction routines. A human map made by a human hand in 6 hours of quiet in a debris field where every electronic system aboard had gone dark. Each dot pressed in with the kind of deliberateness that said, "I have one shot at this, and I intend to get it right." Veth's debriefing category system had 312 subcategories for human behaviors observed in high-stress scenarios. Category 7 was improvised navigation. Category 19 was informal tool adaptation. Category 54 was calm performance under sensor deprivation. Category 112 was pattern matching from environmental reference. She would need a new category. She was not sure what to call it. She picked up the chit and held it toward the port window, and the starlight came through it where the pencil marks weren't pale light, very old light, the same light Dina Calloway had used to find her way home through 40 light seconds of electromagnetic silence. The dots on the chit aligned, roughly, with the smear of the outer arm visible through the port. Not the same stars, but the same logic. The same willingness to look up and trust what was visible, rather than wait for a system that had gone dark to tell her where she was. Veth held the chit there for a long time, in the clean, flat light of the debriefing bay, and looked at the stars through the pencil marks, and tried to find the right word for what she was feeling. She was fairly sure the Carath did not have one either.